Thank you for accessing this presentation about how we are assessing the children from Year 1 to Year 6 at Whiteley Primary School. It will be particularly useful for parents of children in Year 1 and Year 2 who will not have had the opportunity to attend one of our autumn assessment meetings before, but it may also be useful for new parents of children in Key Stage 2 or for parents who would like a refresher of how our assessment system works. Since March 2020, we've had to use a different approach to assessment at Whiteley Primary School within the core subjects. This is due to issues caused by the pandemic. Children's experience of learning during this time have been very different, with some children in special provision, others remote learning. There have also been significant absences due to COVID. This has meant that children have different gaps in their learning, and our priority has been to identify and address these gaps with a focus on key knowledge and skills and a narrower set of criteria than we would normally use. In July 2021, our school reports mentioned whether children were ready to progress to the next year group's curriculum. This acknowledged that even though they may still have some gaps in their learning, they were ready to access the next year group's curriculum. Since September 2021, we felt that we were ready to return to our usual assessment model, and we use something called the Hampshire Assessment Model, also known as HAM, and this was first introduced in 2015 in our school. The HAM is really useful for identifying gaps in learning, but it does assess children against the whole curriculum for their year group in reading, writing and maths. Before I tell you more about the Hampshire Assessment Model, it's helpful to know a little bit about what came before that. In 2015, there were significant national changes to assessment in primary schools. This is because a new national curriculum was introduced between 2014 and 2016, and also there were changes to the way children were assessed at the end of key stages, that's at the end of Year 2 and the end of Year 6. You might have heard of SATs. These are tests that children take at the end of Year 6, but also tests which are used in Year 2 in class to help inform the teacher's assessment of the children. In 2015, the national level descriptors, which all schools around the country were using prior to this, were abolished. This is because they were no longer relevant with the new national curriculum, and instead all schools around the country were asked to devise their own method for assessment between key stages. The old level descriptor system worked like a series of ladders within each subject. So for instance, within maths, a child might be particularly strong at addition and subtraction. Within multiplication and division though, there might be a particular weakness, and that was quite common around division. In fractions and shape and space, the child might be meeting what would be the expected level, a level 4. But because levels descriptors were used as a best fit system, a child with this profile might still finish Key Stage 2 achieving the level 4 expected level because the stronger areas could compensate for any weaknesses. When the new curriculum was published, there was a different emphasis. There is now a requirement for children to meet all criteria within a subject in order to meet what's called ARE, age-related expectations. It was therefore important that whichever assessment system we chose supported children meeting all criteria rather than the old ladder system. Rather than a series of ladders, with the new curriculum it's helpful to think of a brick wall, with each year group providing a curriculum which is a layer of the wall. In order for a child to meet age-related expectations within a subject, they need all of those bricks to be complete, so that there is a strong foundation for the next layer of learning, for the next year group. If a child has any relative weaknesses, it's up to us as teachers to help pinpoint these gaps and to help fill these gaps before they move on to the next year group where we can. If a child has a particular strength in an area, there's an emphasis on breadth and depth. For example, they would be given the opportunity to apply their skills in new contexts to give them confidence and fluency within that skill. The Hampshire Assessment Model was trialled and then launched in a number of Hampshire schools from 2015. It was devised by senior Hampshire inspectors working with their subject specialists. And for maths, reading and writing, they have devised a system which supports the wall analogy for the curriculum. It's a good fit system rather than best fit, and this enables us to pinpoint a child's relative strengths and areas of weakness within one of these subjects so that we can address these areas as a priority. It also enables us to provide more detailed information to parents about their child's strengths and areas for development within a subject area. So, how does it work? Firstly, the subject specialists have divided the national curriculum content for reading, writing and maths into phases for each year group. At Whiteley, we use 4 phases. The phases ensure that the content is taught in a logical order, and each phase builds on the learning from the previous phase. At Whiteley, phase 1 normally finishes around the middle or the end of November, phase 2 finishes at February half term, and phase 3 at the end of April. All new content is introduced by the end of phase 3. At Whiteley, we use phase 4 to revisit areas of learning where children need help to reach the age-related expectations in that subject, to revisit areas where more confidence or fluency is needed, and for those who are doing particularly well in a subject area, to allow further application in a range of contexts to broaden and deepen their understanding. Within the Hampshire Assessment Model, each of the subjects of reading, writing and maths has been split into domains. You can see these on the available handout, but as an example, maths has 6 domains: number and place value, addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, fractions, measurement and geometry. In each phase of learning, every domain is taught, and this ensures that learning is regularly revisited during the year, and trickier concepts can be weighted towards phase 1. There is more new content within phase 1, which is why it's longer, and those concepts can be revisited regularly during the year. Teachers make a judgment at the end of each phase, which we call a milestone assessment. At that point, their judgment is to say whether the child is on track in each domain to meet the age-related expectations at the end of the year. Being on track looks different at different points during the year. At the end of phase 1, at milestone 1, a child may be on track but still be what we'd call apprentice. That means they still need some scaffolding with the new learning, but the teacher feels they've grasped it sufficiently to move on to phase 2. At milestone 2, the expectation would be that the child is now more independent and fluent with the content from phase 1, but they might need some scaffolding for the new content they've received in phase 2. To be on track at milestone 3, the child should be able to now apply content from phase 1 in a new context. They'll be independent and fluent with the new content from phase 2, but they might still need some scaffolding from new content they've received in phase 3. By the end of the year, at milestone 4, teachers make a judgment as to whether a child is on track to meet age-related expectations. To do that, they'll demonstrate independence and fluency across all the domains in that subject, and they'll be able to apply to some new contexts. This academic year, we've made some changes to the timings of the milestone assessments. This is to recognise that children do still have gaps in their learning caused by the pandemic. We allowed longer for phase 1 of learning when the most new content is introduced. This enabled teachers to spend longer recapping prior learning from the previous year group before moving on. Phase 1 ended in the middle of December when teachers made their first milestone assessment. Phase 2 has ended in early March. Phase 3 we expect to finish in the middle of May. This will still give us time for a phase 4 to revisit learning to develop children's fluency and competency in each of the domains for the subjects. So what will this look like for you as parents? You should have received a handout alongside this presentation giving you an example ham tracker printout. At the March parents' meetings this year, you should receive an individual pupil report for your child, which gives an overview of how they are doing in each of the domains for reading, writing and maths, and this will show the data from the end of phases 1 and 2. The assessments are colour-coded. So if you see green, which is secure, it means that the child at this point is securely on track to meet age-related expectations at the end of the year in that domain. If you see a yellow box and it will say close to, the teacher has judged that your child is almost on track in that domain. They believe that your child will be able to catch up by the end of the next phase, but they may not yet be secure enough to say that they are confidently on track. You may see some dark blue boxes, and these say below. This means that your child is not yet on track in that domain. They will need some intervention to support closing the gap with their peers. You may see purple boxes that say beyond. This means that your child is working with more independence or fluency than is expected at this point in the year, or it might mean that they're able to apply their skills already beyond that which is expected at this milestone. This example is similar to what you will receive for your own child at the March parents' meetings. It's an individual assessment report for your child for the first 2 milestones. The first thing to say is that the right-hand side of the sheet can be ignored. We don't use that at this point in the year. Instead, we're interested in the breakdown of your child's assessments in each of the domains of reading, writing and maths, which can be seen on the left-hand side of the page. If we look at the example pupil report for reading, we can see that this child is securely on track in nearly all of the reading domains and is beyond in 2 areas. This means that in word reading and in comprehension, select and retrieve, the child is more fluent, more competent, or applying their skills beyond that which would be expected at this point in the year. In writing, you'll notice that the child was securely on track in all areas apart from handwriting at milestone 1, where they were beyond. At milestone 2, they remained on track in most of the areas and are still beyond in handwriting. But in transcription, which is spelling, they are now deemed as being close to on track. That's the yellow box. Remember that close to means that the teacher expects them to be able to catch up by the end of milestone 3. So currently, that is the area for this child to focus on. Under where it says notes for action, you'll see that there's a target that's been typed in there by the teacher. And at the March parents meeting, you will be given targets for reading, writing and maths for your child to help prioritise what the key areas of learning for them are before the end of the next phase. In the example pupil report for maths, we can see that this is the area they find more tricky. At milestone 1, they were on track in some of the domains, but were close to for addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, and were below in fractions. That means at this point they weren't ready to move on to the next phase of learning. At milestone 2, we can see that fractions is still a weaker area. In addition and subtraction, the child has moved from close to being securely on track. This is great as it means that the teacher was correct in identifying that they were able to catch up by the end of the next milestone. You'll notice, however, that in multiplication and division, the child is now deemed to be below. That means at this point they aren't on track to meet age-related expectations for this domain by the end of the year. It's important to note that that doesn't mean to say the child has gone backwards in this domain. It means that they haven't developed in the competency and fluency required to be on track at this point, and this remains a target area for them. We can see in the notes for action that the teacher has given 2 targets. There is a need for them to learn their 6 times table, and they need to be able to find a fraction of a number. If you are given notes for action for your child, which are things that you could help with at home, it would be really useful to do some practice with them, as they have got the opportunity to be able to catch up and get back on track by the end of the next phase. If you find that your child has been assessed as below in one or more of the domains, please don't panic. This year in particular, we are aware that more pupils will have gaps in their learning caused by absences through the pandemic. They may, for example, have missed some key learning from the autumn term, or they may need more practice to develop the independence and fluency required to be on track with their learning. A shorter phase 4 in the summer term means that some children will be below at the end of the year because they need more practice in learning to apply their skills in new contexts. The aim over time is that most children will close the gap and catch up by the end of Key Stage 2. That's the end of Year 6. The government aim is that 85% of children will meet age-related expectation in reading, writing and maths. For a small number of children, meeting age-related expectations is not a realistic goal. This can be the case for children who've got a significant special educational need or disability. For these pupils, a much more individualised approach is used for planning and assessment. Your child's class teacher will share with you their individual educational plan, or IEP, and also their SEN book, which will show the progress they're making in their specific target areas. It wouldn't be helpful to you as parents to receive the HAM tracker if it continually showed below in all areas, especially as we know your child will be making progress, but at their own pace. Some children might have a specific special educational need that means they are able to be on track in some areas of learning. For example, if they have a particular reading difficulty, it may still be useful for you to have the HAM tracker to show the progress they're making in maths. But alongside this, they would continue to have an IEP and a more individualised approach to assessment for reading. In the past, we found it really useful to share the HAM trackers with parents as it helps us to work together to support children in closing the gaps in their learning. So when you receive your child's individual tracker at the March parents meeting, if your child isn't on track in any of the domains, please do chat to the class teacher about what the priorities are to close those gaps and the ways you can support as parents. If children still need to develop fluency and confidence, practice at home can make a real difference. If your child is on track, the priority for them will be to ensure they continue to develop their independence and they move towards being able to apply these skills in new contexts. Your child's class teacher again can give you ideas of ways you can help your child to continue to develop in their learning. Thank you for accessing this presentation. We hope you found it useful. If you do have any further questions, please do contact a member of the senior leadership team via the admin office email. Ms Bolton is happy to answer any specific queries about special educational needs or disabilities, and either myself, Mrs Pennington, or Mrs Gallagher will be happy to answer any general assessment queries. One of us will also be available on the parents' meetings, so if you've got any specific questions after receiving your child's individual HAM tracker report, then please do pop into the office on your way out. Thank you.